Welcome back. You're watching the Mutual Fund Show, and we've been in conversation with the fund manager of the Edelweiss recently listed IPO fund. We've talked about the thesis and also how he goes about the stock selection. But should this fit in your portfolio? And if you are planning to add it to your portfolio, what should you bear in mind? Joining me to tell you about that are Mrin Agarwal of FinSafe and Nikhil Kotari of Etika Wealth. Thank you so much to the both of you for taking the time. Let's talk about what you think about the scheme first, and then we'll talk about what the investor should bear in mind. Mrin, first to you.
Well, this is the fund that basically chooses from 100 recently listed IPOs. And essentially, it's a thematic fund. And Alex, as you know, I've never been in favor of thematic funds because they tend to be too concentrated and, too concentrated in a theme. And I've always felt that whatever would be the high conviction bets that any fund manager would have would anyway be there in the broad-based funds. It works good for investors who basically want to invest in IPOs and want to invest in many IPOs. But here, of course, you can do it with a limited capital allocation. Essentially, you also have the fund manager doing the due diligence of the fund for you. So, it's not like it's not like you're trying out each and every IPO. So to that extent, I think it's really meant for investors who want to take high risk, who want to invest in IPOs, and possibly for a short-term period. I don't really look at this as a long-term holding fund.
Okay. Do you want to add something to that, Nikhil?
See, as Mrin rightly said, this is just a fund invest in IPOs. So whenever the new IPO comes in, the fund manager will do the due diligence and invest in that. Personally, if you look at it's again very short-term phenomenon that last 2-3 years we are seeing IPOs coming in, they're doing very good, and the overall mid and small cap has given very good return. That's why we are biased toward that. But whenever there is a downfall in the market, right, the number of IPOs may come down dramatically. And that point of time, the fund manager may not have that much liberty to invest in new ideas, and then he'll stick to the old stocks, and then he'll continue holding those stocks. So in that case, personally, if I have to invest my own money, I will not invest in a very thematic, very specific IPO fund. And if any fund manager likes any IPO, he can always invest in diversified fund by being an anchor investor. So if the IPO is very good, it doesn't stop any fund manager to invest on their own. So why I need to stick to only IPO fund.
And also, as you were pointing out, there is a tendency to move towards the broader end of the spectrum, because how many large IPOs do you see? You see a lot in the mid and the small cap space. That could also be a risk factor, right, Mrin?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other point that we should always remember that most of the IPOs come in bull markets, most of them come at very high valuations. Of course, we had also seen the trend of cases where the IPO money was not really being used, reinvested in the company, but was used to give exit to a promoter. So I think, IPOs have their own issues. And I mean, there are very few IPOs. I think if you look at it historically also, I think, probably there'll be only 15% of IPOs that actually, give you great returns in the long term. So I just think that, and of course, Nikhil also pointed out that in bear markets, you really don't have that many IPOs, right? So that's then going to have it's going to have an impact on the performance of the fund. So I think it's just better to stay away.
Having said that, from what I see, the 3 years annualized return is quite decent for this. It's close to 20%. The 5-year annualized return is as much as 20.75%. So it's not like the theme hasn't worked. But as you point out, it is a thematic fund. It is a theme. So from that perspective, who invests in this according to you, Nikhil, and where does it fit in your portfolio?
Yeah. So Alex, I want to point out one specific concern in this one. So if you look at the last 3 years and 5 years, last 1 year returns are showing very good, because the fund, if you look at the overall allocation of this fund, 71% is in small cap and around 26% is in mid cap. So if you look at this fund, it's like a mid and small cap fund. And if you compare this fund with a small cap fund, then this fund has underperformed the small cap funds.
Sure.
Right? And the index. So the reason why this fund is showing you very good return is because the last 1 year rally in the small and mid cap was substantial. So if you look at 2022 specifically here, this fund has underperformed dramatically, right? But because the last 1 year has been amazing for the small and mid cap and the IPO market, that's why you're seeing the last 3 years 5 year return showing very good. Okay, so for the investors, I'll say that person who's looking at mid and small cap and looking at new ideas to be invested, and he wants to take exposure to new ideas coming in the market, and from a diversification perspective, he can have some amount of money in the portfolio, because the stocks in this portfolio may be quite different than the existing small cap funds or mid cap funds, because this is only investing in new ideas and not primarily keep on investing in the old ideas.
Okay.
Where the normal small cap fund may have a good legacy portfolio continuing as such.
Okay, and so therefore, Mrin, who should invest in this, if at all, and would you recommend very strongly a limit to how much you should take exposure to this?
Well, I think it's really meant for tactical allocation. Sure. If you really want to just capitalize right now on this big IPO boom and the bull market, yes, you could look at it for a short period of time. I think, essentially you need to have a good exit strategy. You need to be very clear that if I make this X% return, let's say you say 20% return, then I'm going to look at exiting this fund. So it's really meant for very high risk investors as a tactical allocation bet to cash in on the current market conditions.
Nikhil, I didn't get your answer on that bit. Who, according to you, should invest in? Is there a limit that you would recommend? Generally, I think advisors like yourself, and I don't put words in your mouth, but generally advisors like yourself say 10% of equity allocation to thematic. So would you say that that's relevant to this as well?
So I say 10%, what we say 10 to 15% can be thematic, but that can be multiple themes, sure, depending on what theme is not performed right now. But specific to this fund, I'm saying this cannot be more than 2 to 5% of your portfolio, and it should be a part of your mid and small cap exposure, because as you rightly said in the first thing, that a lot of IPOs comes in mid and small cap. So this should be a part of your mid and small cap allocation, and that you can take as a thematic exposure from here.
Fantastic. All right. That brings us to the end of this particular edition of the Mutual Fund Show. Thank you to the both of you for taking the time.